You're going to see a panel of special guests. So please, you'll have time to ask questions later. Start thinking about that. But right now, please help me in welcoming our panel. First of all, you've heard her on the Madeline Brand Show. Please welcome Madeline Brand. And then please welcome the director of the pilot episode and future episodes, Greg Mottola. And now, executive producer of The Newsroom and a Film Independent board member, please welcome Alan Poul. And finally, the creator of Newsroom. Please welcome Aaron Sorkin.
So dark. Hi, everyone. What a show! Wow. Let's start with you, Aaron, and let's. I don't know why, but let's just start with you. All right.
We had a fight outside.
We did. We're going to make it now.
I was right.
No, I was right. We'll leave that aside. You created Sports Night. You created Studio 16 and Central Square. Both of those about TV, sports show, comedy show. You wrote a Broadway play about the creation of television. What is your obsession with television?
Here's what I think it is. I saw American Graffiti when I was very little, so little I saw it in a drive-in theater. And I haven't seen the movie in a long, long time, so I don't remember much of it. But the image that has always stuck with me, and this is, I'm assuming a lot of you, if not all of you, have seen American Graffiti, and probably more recently than I have. But the image that's always stuck with me is Wolfman and Jack out in that little shack, eating his popsicles, and broadcasting this signal into the middle of the night. He's out in the middle of nowhere, and he's broadcasting a signal into the middle of the night. And I've just always been very romantic about that ever since I saw it. And but though that's nothing compared to how I feel about popsicles. And I find live television very romantic. Listen, I like workplace stories to begin with. I've never worked in live television myself, but I find it very romantic, just the idea that everybody's working toward 8 o'clock, and in my mind, these guys are up in a treehouse in their skyscraper, just like Wolfman Jack is out in the middle of nowhere, and they're broadcasting their signal after the middle of the night.
Very romantic. Do you have a very romantic view of television and television news?
You are going to hear me say the word romantic many times tonight.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean romantic?
Well, what I mean is I like to write a romantic and idealistic style as opposed to a gritty style. This show, for instance, The Newsroom, will get compared to Network, which on the one hand is nice. It's one of my favorite movies, and it's one of the greatest American movies ever made. So it's actually the opposite of Network. Network was a pitch black, very cynical look at television in general and television news in particular. This is an extremely idealistic, optimistic look at television news in particular. They're reaching unrealistically high. They'll fall down sometimes as a result, but it's really meant more as a painting than a photograph.
Well, let's talk about that Howard Beale moment then at the beginning of this episode, where Will McAvoy does a Howard Beale in a sense. And did you have that in mind when you wrote that scene?
As a matter of fact, that opening scene was the very last thing that was written for the show. Only maybe, I can't remember now, a few weeks maybe before
It was the last draft.
That's right. Up until then, we'd only heard that something happened. Some event happened on a panel where Will, lost it a little bit, and now he's scrambling to put it all together. And our other executive producer, Scott Rudin, who couldn't be here tonight because he's producing every movie ever made, said to me, why don't you try taking a whack at actually writing that event, that thing that people are talking about, and that's how that happened.
And Greg, you directed that. You directed that scene, and the entire episode.
The version of the script that I got it right after you wrote it, so it wasn't the version I got, and it was very exciting to read on the page. It was, of course, it was terrifying and challenging figuring out how we're going to shoot that, but it was such a thrilling opening, and it's such a tour de force for Jeff too. And it was very exciting to shoot that and watch what Jeff did with it in particular.
Talk a bit about how you decided to shoot that, because a lot of the excitement, it's not only the words and what he says, but it's the way you cut it, the way you shot it, the different camera angles. You have lots of different camera angles, the fact that you're sort of interior inside his head and everything goes black. You just hear the squawking of the two on either side.
Well, one of the things I love that Aaron does is write very long scenes, but they have a lot of shape and a lot of change in them. And I was trying to approximate a visual style to break up the pieces of the scene, because it really does have acts to it. That whole opening has several different acts, and I tried to figure out what that should look like. But there was a degree of experimentation when we shot it. We shot the first parts when he's listening to the pundits arguing a bunch of different ways so we could shape it in the editing room and kind of do with pictures what Aaron has provided with words throughout the script. I was trying to have some approximation of that thing you do.
Mm-hmm. That's energy.
Yeah, and how things take surprising turns, and I find it very interesting in movies and screenwriting. You're always, I went to film school. You're always told to come in late in the scene, get out early, try and reduce everything down, and if you do it all the time, you sometimes never get to the heart of something. You never things don't develop. And what I love about Aaron's writing is the development that happens within a long scene, a long dialogue scene. The surprises that take place within that scene. It's not just the juxtaposition of scenes, but it's the things that are happening in front of us. Because Aaron started as a playwright, and it's a very theatrical, satisfying style, technique. Do you think I'm right, or are you just gonna?
I appreciate what you said, and I still marvel at the phenomenal job that you did with that scene. There were about 100 ways to do it badly.
Some of those are on the
mistakes you can make. No, and you generally avoided all of them. You made it thrilling. Even in my mind, when I was writing it, obviously when you're writing it, you think it's good and you hope it's going to turn out well, but you far exceeded my wildest hopes. And I also just wanted to mention that it was very early in the shooting process that we shot that scene. We had about 2 days to shoot that northwestern scene. So we didn't yet know each other nearly as well as we know each other now. We're very much a family. And I went to Jeff, and again, we'd only been working together for a couple of days. And he was sitting on stage, sort of. He likes to kind of be alone when he's in public, when he's about to do something big, and he had his head down like this. And I just went to him really quietly, and I said, "Listen, man, look at the size of the room. If you want, we can put it on cue cards up there, back there for you." And he looked up at me, and he then did all the statistics in the speech backwards, from end to beginning for me, just stared me off, and went, You're all set.
You know, it's also worth noting that the original plan for that sequence was to have real-life news people, somebody from the right and somebody from the left, playing themselves. I think originally it was scripted as Sean Hannity and Chris Matthews.
That's right. As originally written, it was an actual person from the right, an actual person from the left. But then, in sort of the second iteration, the second draft, the speech always stayed roughly the same. It was what came before it, everything that was, all the poking at Jeff, all the poking at Will, I should say, getting to do that, that I did a couple of drafts of, and suddenly, because of all the overlapping that had to happen, we knew you need actors to do this. We're not going to be able to get Chris Matthews and Sean Hannity to do it. We're not going to be able to get, you can't cast this. That you need actors because it's going to be really hard, the overlapping that I was going to need and that you were going to need.
Yeah, that was just a huge bullet that we dodged.
And it was a gigantic bullet that we dodged, and it was at that moment also that I made the decision that not just in that scene, but that in the entire series, there would never be, no one would ever play themselves except in news footage. That you're not going to see, Brian Williams kind of pop his head in the door and say, "Hey, Will, how you doing?" You're never going to see that people will only play themselves.
And why is that? Because you didn't think that they could be convincing playing themselves?
The biggest reason is, yes, that it just jumps out as stunt casting. There are situations, there are shows where that didn't really work. I played myself on Entourage, and I played myself on 30 Rock, and have not really been recognized for my work.
Right now, yeah.
Well, now, and those shows are absolutely set up where that kind of thing is pleasurable. Here, you simply need professional actors to do it, and the stunting would just jump out as hokey, I think. And honestly, I just have too much respect for actors and the skills they have to have, and I think if you were to stick an amateur in there, it would have roughly the same effect as if you were to stick me into a Lakers game for a minute. So we don't do it at all.
All right, so you write all the scripts, every last word.
I do, but I do it with the help of a great staff of people. It's a room where there's a lot of diversity of thought. There are some people in the room who have experience in news, and then there are some people in the room who have experience in storytelling, but sort of a facility for this, and as well as experts who are giving me crash course tutorials in things I don't know about, which is everything. I'm almost always writing about something I don't know anything about, so I have to at least get phonetically right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then ultimately, yeah, you have to go into a room by yourself and write the script.
And then, Alan, you do everything else, so he writes.
Yeah, I do everything else left over.
And then he just crawls meekly away, doesn't have any control over this.
Maybe not meekly.
It's pretty meekly, but the description that you're giving is apt. Alan and I are both executive producers, but it's pretty well understood on the set that mine is kind of an honorary title. Really, the only like you want Alan there producing the show. The only reason you would want me around is to write the script. I'm the last person you want producing the show. We would still be back shooting the Northwestern scene if I was producing.
But that said, I mean, there's a clear division in that everything on the page comes from Aaron, and everything that we do is based on the page. And everybody there, including myself as a producer and director, including Greg Mottola there, including the entire cast, it's understood that the nature of the job that we're all bringing our various skill sets to is to take what Aaron has written and put it on its feet. There's a text in every sense of the word. And so when we start each scene with a rehearsal where the actors just sit around and read the words, just to make sure that the words are right, that the words sound right, that they're being given the right inflection. And that always starts with Aaron, and then the director will do his work in terms of what we call blocking, putting the scene on its feet, and then just before we shoot, we'll always make sure to get Aaron back down, just to make sure that there isn't something we're missing or something that we're under or overstressing. And so, and then the real producing
And how much
begins.
of the actress allowed?
And I'm sorry, but you skipped a step, which is that after the script is written and before it's shot, and of course there's all kinds of tactical prep that has to go on. The director has about 2 weeks to prep the show, which includes sets have to be built. He's got to figure out what the cameras are going to do, and a million things have to be done. But in between that, putting the script on the table, and the 2 weeks later when we shoot the first scene, I rely on Alan and Greg also as script editors. I need to hear their notes on the script. Left to my own devices, for instance, in that first scene, I would have written a long speech. So I really count on their eyes and love their creative sensibility, and really trust them to the extent that even if I think they might be wrong, I will tend to say okay, yeah, just because I just trust them that much, and that I had just spent too much time by myself in my office, sort of in the middle of it.
Well, both of you are veterans from other shows, and how is it different to realize a script that must be that size of a phone book?
For a mid-sized American city, yeah. No, I think that, we've both done a lot of work, both in television and features, but I think the biggest difference here is, one is that you have one person who is so singularly the voice of the show and writes every script. But the other is, I think that, and Greg and I both learned this and working on it, is that there is a very specific musicality to what Aaron writes. I think he can talk about that as well, but it is words as music, and so you don't look at a script as a blueprint where you're going to mess around and change the lines and get very methody with it. You look at it as you would look at a score, and there's plenty of room for creative input for the conductor, but it's still, the score is the score, and I think that it creates it's a slightly different job.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain amount of anxiety, I think, on the pilot about the length of it, but you know that your stuff condenses down to shorter. Studio scripts used to be much longer than they are now because the acting style is faster. A 90-minute movie that was made by Warner Brothers or MGM or Paramount back in the 40s was probably 140 pages. They just talked really fast. That was the way they acted. And it's, it's become a cliche, but in Aaron's world, there is a certain speed, there's an urgency. These are smart / really neurotic people who have a lot to get off their chest. And it just makes sense when it's performed fast. And we had a lot of great theater actors who could handle that. And I've worked on things where actors do not come to set knowing their lines, and that was not an option here. They had to know everything. Just the story you tell about Jeff being able to recite it backwards.
Yeah, and they also knew you can't just know them. They have to be part of your bloodstream. It's got to be like your phone number, and that's the only way that you've just got to be able to toss it off. Once it's in that, it's usually in that fraction of a second that you're reaching for the next word or the next line that you cover that reach by acting. Yes, dear, that kind of thing. And for this dialogue, for these long chunks of things to be bearable, there's just a style in which they have to be flipped off. So you see the entire cast all day kind of walking around the set like they're in a meth ward, mumbling and muttering these lines over and over again, until that's all they know how to say. It's like yes in their name, they wouldn't know it, but they know how to say this thing.
Yeah, and it comes from, I mean, really, thank God we have Jeff as, what we say, number one on the call sheet, but Jeff as the leader, he sets the bar so high, and he comes in so prepared. He always has more dialogue than anybody else, and he comes in knowing it, presents it backwards and forwards, so that from day one of the shoot, there was never any possibility that anybody else would fall behind because everybody had to keep up with Jeff.
I want to talk about what you're trying to say with this, and in terms of the news, and in terms of where you think the news is, journalism is, and what you want people to get out of this in terms of how they view their nightly news.
Well, first of all, I really mean this when I say that what I want people to get out of it is a good time, and that's all I'm going for. I'm not writing a screed or an op-ed piece or a polemic. We shoot our show on Stage 7 at Sunset Gower Studios, and there's a plaque right outside the door commemorating the fact that the Monkees also shot on that stage. Our goals are exactly the same. Exactly the same. The Don Quixote reference, or references that you saw in his first episode. By the way, the season was 10 episodes long, and this, we probably should have told you this beforehand. HBO very generously is letting us air this first episode at 1 hour and 15 minutes instead of an hour. So if it seemed long to you, it's only because it was. All the other episodes will be an hour, and there's a difference between this and the other series that I've done. In the other series, I really flew by the seat of my pants. Once I got done with one episode, I had no idea what the next episode was going to be about. And with this one, I gave much more thought at the beginning of the season to the arc of the season. And it's really a 10-hour story that, when you put it all together, resembles the 3-act structure of a movie. This, what you just saw, is the prologue, or the first third of the first of 3 acts that you're going to see. I
just want to push back on that, because you have included storylines.
Don't push back.
Okay. You've included in the real news stories that you picked, and in several episodes, are contentious stories that have divided this country along political and ideological lines.
Yeah.
You could have chosen the European debt crisis, which perhaps in this country wouldn't be as controversial.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't. You chose in a later episode to take on the Tea Party.
Right.
To talk about immigration in Arizona.
Right.
I'm not buying you're just entertaining. I think that you're trying to say something as well.
Okay. I am going to answer you honestly, and I promise I'm going to answer the here's what I'm trying to say question. But I must underline that I am trying to entertain you by saying that. I grew up in my family. I'm the youngest in my family. Everyone in my family is smarter than I am. All of my friends growing up were smarter than I am. And I really grew up loving the sound of smart people arguing with each other. And I wasn't really able to participate, but I listened, and I feel like if I have a skill, it's being able to phonetically imitate that sound. And that's what I like to do. So we are living in a divided country. These are divisive issues. It's certainly, we haven't done ourselves any favors by doing that. There are going to be people, we would all love for the show simply to be judged on its creative merits, but we are realistic, and we know that there are people who are going to not like the show because they disagree with its politics. The same is true with West Wing. That said, it is a Don Quixote story of people who it's meant to be just a swashbuckling fantasy set against a very unusual backdrop, which is real events and the real world. As you say, these are divisive issues. And if the show within the show, if Newsnight, stands for something, it stands against false equivalency and false neutrality. The idea that fairness should be a priority in news. It is, and this is the only place where I sort of inject my own politics into their mouth. The idea that fairness is important to news, I think, is anathema to good news and to democracy. I think that here I'll make an
fairness or being objective.
Those are two different things. The fairness I'm talking about, I guess really what I'm talking about is balance and not fairness. Those two words have become conflated because it's the slogan of Fox News. What I'm talking about is if you say a bad thing about a Democrat, you have to say a bad thing about a Republican. And if you say two bad things about a Democrat, you have to say two bad things about a Republican. I do not think that in the 60s, anytime there was a news story about the civil rights movement, anytime there was a news story about fire hoses being turned on civil rights workers, that they felt that Walter Cronkite felt that there also had to be a story about Jim Crow laws being rooted in the rich history of the South. That we need some kind of balance here. People made a decision. No, there is an empirical right and wrong here, and it's okay to say so when you're on the news. And Will does, and there are going to be people, audience members, who will push back a lot harder than you just did on that idea. We know that. But I just want to go back to I came in. I got here a while ago. There were pictures and stuff to do, but I wanted to stand in back and watch the show, be with the audience watching the show, which you hardly ever get to do with a television show. It's really the one thing, one of the very few things I don't like about television is that I never get the experience of being with the audience unless I just come into your home at 10 o'clock and then we get into a whole other thing. But I did stand back and listen to people just full-throatedly laugh at the jokes. And I came in right as the sort of the whole team was being whipped together for the first time. We were seeing breaking news for the first time on Newsnight. I felt the excitement in the room, and I felt like you guys were watching it like, wow, suddenly Greg Mottola turned this into an action movie. This is pretty cool, and that is my only goal. It's a very hard thing to do. It's a very gratifying thing to do when you've accomplished it, and that's all we're looking for. I promise you.
Well, let me ask you another question then.
Oh, God.
Sorry. So Will says at the beginning, we used to be a great nation. Help me out here. We used to build great things, send men to the moon.
Not help you out here.
We
sure used to.
We sure used to.
Okay, we fought wars for moral reasons. We passed and struck down laws for moral reasons.
Okay, so
we built great big things, made ungodly technological advances, explored the universe.
And he says...
Berkeley. She went to Berkeley.
That was when,
With women's web and stuff.
Well, this is going to go to the question because it says we were informed by great men. And men who were revered. Are you saying that was the golden age of news and that you wish that that's what we had now?
Well, first of all, there's something I can do about the fact that there weren't any women anchors during that time. I'm not kidding. I think it would have been great. There are fantastic female journalists right now, and I'm talking to one of them right now. Fantastic one. Whoever called me stuck up, damn straight.
Wait, do you believe that?
That was the golden age of this?
Yeah,
Yes.
that could we, if we could, would that we could go back to that time?
Yeah, I'm not, I don't wish that we could erase a lot of the terrific advances that we've made. There are more choices now, but I wish we could go back to a time when, there was a stretch of, 5, 6, 8, 9 years when year after year in a survey, the most trusted man in America was an anchor man, it was Walter Cronkite. When was the last time a journalist was trusted at all by anyone but, sort of the demographic that listens to that person? I wish we could go back to a time when it used to be that networks had a firewall between the entertainment division and the news division, that you were supposed to make money with Petticoat Junction and Gilligan's Island, and that's how you made a profit, and that the news was supposed to be a loss leader, and that one never had anything to do with the other. That firewall is gone, which means that the news division now has a mandate to get ratings. You're going to get much higher ratings leading with Casey Anthony than you're going to get leading with the European debt crisis, right?
I believe so.
Okay, which
Maybe
is
not
more...
at NPR. But.
Right, but working for NPR is a different story, but that's going to... I agree with Mackenzie that nothing is more important to a democracy than a well-informed electorate. I think it will find the fire right now.
Okay, we have a few moments for questions from the audience. Yes.
Aaron, two parts. Why 2010 specifically? And are you Don Quixote or Sancho Panza?
I'm the donkey, I think. If that's best, I'd be honored to be the donkey. I've always loved Don Quixote. Man of La Mancha was the first play I saw when I was 5, and then, however many years later, I realized it was based on a book, and as soon as I was old enough to read that book, I did, and I've read it many times. It's a book I read the way other people read the Bible. I get to the end, and I start at the beginning, or I'll go to a particular chapter. Why that particular date? When I was sort of ruminating about the show, and I knew I wanted to do a series set in the newsroom, but that was all I had. That was as far as the idea was formed. I was spending time hanging out in different newsrooms, hoping that something would happen there that where I'd say, hey, that's a good idea for a story for the pilot episode. I can get started. I can write something, and then that'll take me someplace else. I was sitting in MSNBC's newsroom in New York at 30 Rockefeller Center, and thinking this isn't going to work because I don't want to have to make up the news. If I make up fake news, this is just going to get crazy. What am I going to do with? And obviously, I'm not going to know what the real news is 6 months before a show airs. But are we really going to do a story about like an assassination attempt on the president? Are we really going to do a story about the stock market crashing when it didn't? I didn't want it to be that fictional. I wanted the characters to be entirely fictional. I wanted that little floor, that one corner of the world to be Camelot, idealistic and romantic. I wanted everything else to be real. And I was out of ideas. I didn't know how to do it. And it was on this day that I was going to throw in the towel and say, I don't have it, and I'm not going to be able to do this. I sort of have to decide to do something else. And while I was thinking all these thoughts of giving up, I was staring blankly. I didn't even notice that I was staring at a monitor that was showing oil spilling out of Deepwater Horizon. I don't know if you remember, they had the spill cam, 24-hour underwater camera showing the oil coming out. And I was staring at it. It was like day 55 in the spill or something. And wait a second. why does the show have to take place today? Why can't it be a period piece? Instead of 100 years ago, it's, at the time, it was going to be a few months ago. Now it turns out 2 years ago. But I thought, yeah, we'll just start out, like a normal show, and everything will seem normal. And I didn't know about Will, I didn't know about Mackenzie, I didn't know about anything having to do with their romance, I didn't know anything. It was supposed to be a normal show, and then suddenly you'll just hear beep beep, and you're going to be familiar with that beep beep. It's the sound of iNews on a computer. It goes up about 100 times a day. Usually, more often than not, it's just that Charlie Sheen did something, and people don't, frankly, pay that much attention to it when it's yellow. But in this particular case, it's going to be that an oil rig has just exploded off the Gulf of Mexico, and a legend will come on the screen that says April 20th, 2010, and we will at that moment realize that what we've been watching is 2 years ago. And not only did that solve the problem that I had of, what about the news? How are we going to do that in moments when we're seeing sharp to the news? But it added a whole bunch of other things that I could do. First of all, you have the fun of, from time to time, the audience knowing more than the characters do, right? Like you did in this case. That's a lot of fun. Like I'm not giving away spoilers. But you'll see it's episode 7. They're all at a party on Sunday night, and they're all getting loaded, and their sort of strange tweets and texts are coming in that's just weird, that don't really make sense until you put the puzzle together, and then one email blast goes off that says, "Get to work. The president to address the country at 10:30 on a matter of national security." None of them know what it is. We all know what it is. It's going to be the biggest story of their lives. So you have that element of fun. And then, finally, going back, and because I'm a behind-the-scenes buff, I love just anything that, where you can pull back the curtain on something that we don't usually get to see. We get the news by listening to you, or by checking in on the internet, or by turning on TV, or a friend calls us. How do the people who give us the news find out about the news? We get to see that too. So it didn't just solve a problem; it added a bunch of fun stuff to play around with.
Anyone else?
Now I'd like to talk for longer, please.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to repeat your question.
Actually, all 4 of us are Northwestern students, and I have a question that I want to in the bill. Why did you choose Northwestern as opposed to another school?
The question is, why did you choose to use Northwestern rather than another school?
Same question the chancellor at my alma mater asked me. Because Northwestern, the School of Journalism, has such a great reputation.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about the set. It's fantastic, and I wanted to particularly ask Greg about the challenges of shooting in what is essentially a practical medium.
Thank you. I built the set.
Well, it was really interesting thing that Alan and I got to do with the production designer, Richard Hoover, who's insanely talented. We got to go behind the scenes of CNN, NBC, Fox, and Bloomberg, and see what they do and how they do it and what it looks like. We were pretending to be there to get ideas for a color palette, but we were just spying.
Stealing, right?
Yes, just stealing and spying on Fox. But we had to talk long and hard about, are we going to make a working studio and control room? And at the end of the day, we just realized there was no other way to do it. That was one of the most exciting kind of live TV aspects of the show, of shooting scenes where, Jeff's doing the broadcast and Emily Mortimer and John Gallagher are in the control room with all their team, and we have cameras in both rooms and we're shooting it live. I've shot multiple cameras before, but never multiple locations and multiple cameras. So we made it an actual working room. It also, you don't get sets like that to play with too often. It really helped us with the design of how it was going to be shot. We had a great DP, Barry Aykroyd, for the pilot. He shot The Hurt Locker. He shoots for, Ken Loach and Paul Greengrass, and he he's a documentary filmmaker. We would shoot with 2 or 3 cameras, get really far back from the actors, not give them marks, really let the acting and the energy of the acting, the energy of the writing dictate what the camera was doing, as opposed to pasting a style on top of what was happening. And we kind of boldly put reflections everywhere, and just to make it extra hard. Alan can talk about going to CNN and all that stuff. It was a place you just don't get let inside.
But the prevailing aesthetic being that we wanted the sense that you are a voyeur, that you are capturing a reality rather than you're watching something that has been very meticulously staged, dictated that we didn't want the actors to have to be acting to playback, where their responses would have to be timed to what had been pre-recorded from another actor's performance. And so we took the leap and created so everything's happening live. So Jeff and Emily are talking to each other live when, for instance, when in the pilot, when Jeff is fighting with the guy from Halliburton, he was on a teeny little set that we built in the back of the same set, so he was interacting with him live. Emily's able to watch them in the control room live and listen and try to jump in on it. And there's an immediacy to that I think we couldn't have gotten any other way.
Can I just ask you about the guy on the phone? Is that Jesse Eisenberg?
As Eric Neal, there's an instance. The only instance I think all season. I'm sure I'm not wrong about that, where an actor is playing a real person. Eric Neal is a real person. Everything that's said in that conversation was said by Eric Neal in an interview, but about a week later. So I think the only thing I made up in that scene was like, good evening or something, salutations.
Yes.
Aaron, you mentioned not knowing anything, and I wanted to know what the process is for this or for the West Wing as well. When you watch the episode, it would seem like you're a complete expert on newsrooms or what goes on in the White House. What's the process of writing that script? Is it research first?
It's incredibly research intensive, and in a particular kind of way. Because really what I'm looking for is, I'm not trying to write a paper on it. I'm trying to find the point of friction. I'm trying to find the conflict. What are two people disagreeing on, or what's the intention and what's the obstacle? So I will find, the person who, the right person to talk to about this. Basically I'll say, and they're called pro-con memos, the research, that kind of research that's written for me. And I'll say, tell me what you think, and then tell me what the really smart person in the room who disagrees with you is going to say to that. I will take that and try to make it entertaining. I'm not kidding. Okay.
Very entertaining. This is very entertaining. Any more entertaining questions? Yes.
When you talk about having characters report on actual events that happen, is the plan to continue reporting on actual events from like the year before, or is there a point where it catches up to present day?
We cover about 18 months in the first season. This is also an experiment that we'll see if it works or not. Listen, the events can't fully catch up to present day ever, because we write them and shoot them well in advance. By the way, one of the differences between HBO and working on the networks is all of the episodes are in the can right now. We're doing this tiny editing tweaks, the tiny music tweaks in the final episode. All the episodes have been written, shot, in the can, and ready to go. And the reason I'm making that distinction is because if this were on NBC, I would be writing episode 9 while episode 5 was on the air. You hear a lot of opinions when you're doing this kind of thing. And I'm someone, and other writers will have this habit too. it's very easy to try to fall into the habit of writing to change your mind. If I run into you on the street and you say, boy, that Will McAvoy is kind of a jerk, isn't he? I'm thinking, no. I mean, I know why you're saying that. But he's a great guy. He's really easy to love and root for. He's damaged inside. And let me, in this next episode, I'm going to make sure that that you know that. And I can't do that now. There is no opinion I can say. Our fate is sealed. Oh.
Do you get fewer notes, shall we say, from your overlords?
HBO is great to work for. They also serve as script editors. The notes that they give have nothing to do with anything, but we think the script can be improved here or there. In other words, it's not about making it more commercial. Fundamentally, on premium cable, like HBO, non-advertiser supported television, obviously we want people to watch the show. But it's less important how many people are watching the show than it is how much the people who are watching the show like the show. And you're in business with the audience and not the advertisers. The business model wasn't, I'm sure, set up to please writers and directors. It's just a happy, unintended consequence of it. We don't get a ton of notes. There isn't a ton of meddling. What there is a ton of is what can we do to help. But the notes that we get are almost always fine.
We have time for 2 more questions, Natalie.
2 more questions? Yes, right here.
Fun. I've been talking for a while. All right. We were incredibly lucky to get her. I wrote the scene. I gave everybody the heads up that in this episode we're going to meet Leona Lansing. She is the CEO of Atlantis World Media, parent company of Atlantis Cable News. She is sort of the Rupert Murdoch of this world, or Jeff Bewkes of this world, or ironically Ted Turner of this world. And there are maybe a handful of actresses in the world, who with the right age and have the right skills to play this part, because we had already, before we meet her son, who's the president of the company. That's why I said Rupert Murdoch, because there's also a James Murdoch figure, which is her son, played by Chris Messina. So she had to be of a certain age too. And one of Alan's greatest expressions is "Let's reach high," we wanted to reach really high with the casting. James Bond was our first choice. I wrote. As soon as I'd written the scene, we sent it to her, and she said yes, and we jumped up for joy.
One more question. Okay, way up there. Yeah, go ahead.
I had 2 questions, but they're both yes or no. I really enjoyed watching this because I worked for the Department of Homeland Security and the press office. Got to see the response to the other side. Curious if you're going to continue covering that. Also, will you ever write a TV girlfriend as good as Mary Louise Parker at TV Gardner?
Thank you, and I'll pass the compliment on to Mary Louise. Episode 2 takes place. This is actually. Okay. Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.